Hi, everyone. I'm Danny, and on behalf of everybody here working tirelessly behind the scenes, and for those appearing in front of a mic and or a camera, I just want to welcome you all back to day 2 of Everyone Games 2022. I've had the best time here. I hope you guys are having fun too. We've had some really good games already. Yesterday was a blast. But good morning. And if it's not morning for you still, then good day. We're here to share with you our mission of accessibility and inclusivity, and we're doing it through a lot of games and a little bit of just a smidge of information. And we're doing that by supporting 2 different charities. We have Everyone Can, which is a UK-based charity that works to connect people with disabilities and technology to help make their everyday lives easier. That often includes gaming, which is the whole reason why we're here. And our second charity is Stack Up, which is a US-based charity that works with active and retired military service members to promote positive mental health, where they work with suicide prevention, and they do that through gaming as well. You guys will hear more about that from some of our wonderful panelists. But before we jump into our panel, I would like to share with you guys some of the amounts that we've raised because you've been absolutely amazing. So far, for Everyone Can, we have raised just under 2,000 euros altogether. And for Stack Up, we have raised around $1,375 USD. And you guys all know money makes things happen. So we want to thank you so much for being here, for giving what you can, because when you can give just a little bit, it can really make a big difference in someone else's life. All right, so the games and panels this year have been wonderful. We've summed that up. It's been absolutely astounding. I hope you'll stick around. We have more fun stuff in store for you today. And this is the gaming and mental health panel. Both of these topics are near and dear to my heart personally because of my own experience in my education, as well as my love for gaming. But as passionate as I am, these panelists we have today are just as passionate and way more qualified than I am. So let's start with some introductions. I would love for each of you in turn to introduce yourself, tell us just a little bit about what you do, and then briefly share how gaming has impacted maybe your own life. Let's start with Sean.
Oh, wasn't ready.
On the spot.
Well, I'm Sean, or Deity, if we're using our superhero names for our online personas and our gaming. I'm one of the influence relations managers with StackUp, so I work with content creators that are doing exactly this to set these things up and get people doing online charity fundraising for StackUp. And then that support there, as well as being an educator, subject matter expert on the programs that we have and what we do. I'm also a retired Army Sergeant First Class, a 2-time combat veteran, and used gaming long before StackUp existed, and then even after it did exist, was using gaming as a means of therapy of certain types of combat stress relief or PTSD relief from anxiety, depression, and I didn't know it. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. So I obtained that information through my learning about StackUp and what they do. I was like, oh, I do that already. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that. So, oh, I actually do use these extracurricular activities for my mental health. And you don't, and that's great. You just don't realize that it's giving you that. So anyway, that's me.
All right, let's stick to the theme and let's go to Zach next.
Thanks. My name is Zach, also known as Reavantos for my online name. I run the Overwatch program here at StackUp, which is our crisis intervention and suicide prevention peer-to-peer program that's available 24/7, 365. I actually got involved with StackUp through a game stream, a game that I'd been using since I left the service. I was U.S. Coast Guard, now retired. And just like Sean, I was using it as a way to kind of, network with similar people, relax, manage my anxiety. And that's how I just now use that gaming and the power of gaming to help others. And we incorporate gaming into the Overwatch program. And as a way to help people like retrain their memory or work with other issues they may be having and facing, and we use specific games for that to help in addition to the crisis intervention and suicide prevention.
That's awesome. Naomi, would you like to go next?
Sure. I just wanted to say, Zach, I'm really excited to hear about how you use games around memory and as well as mental health. We have time to get into that. But yeah, my name is Naomi Hazlette. I'm an occupational therapist based in Canada. I also am involved in the editing and writing world. I was involved on the Limitless Heroics project with Dale. We might talk a little bit about that as a sensitivity consultant and editor. And I appreciate that you asked that question around, how games affected your personal life, because I do a lot of work with games in my professional life, but of course it started with, growing up or in my own life, just realizing how therapeutic games were when I looked back. So for me, I play a lot of TRPGs or tabletop role-playing games. I find that they're a great space to explore my identity, work through things that I'm going through in a narrative way. And that's why I use TRPGs in my practice as an OT. And I also play a lot of video games. And I mean, again, there's just so much to talk about. I find that, they're really relaxing. They help take my mind off things. Again, just the stories that video games tell kind of help you reflect on your own life. So yeah, that's what I'm bringing to the table today.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go with Caleb next.
Hi, so I'm Caleb. I'm an inclusive designer and researcher. So my thing is I did my master's thesis on neurodiversity Dungeons and Dragons, with trying to build in neurodiversity and like considerations for mental health into your actual player character. And I'm also neurodivergent myself, and I came through that journey of doing my thesis. I didn't know going in, well, I suspected, but game so much, like exploring identity, like Naomi said, like I went through this whole internal journey through doing my thesis, obviously, but because of games, I did it because I had a bunch of neurodivergent friends, and we were always playing video games and tabletop games and role-playing games that explored these aspects of identity. And like I wouldn't be where I am in my life without having that opportunity to explore identity because of tabletop games. So it's very near and dear to my heart.
I love that. Thank you. And last but not least, Dale.
Hey, Dale Critchley, owner of Wyrmworks Publishing. Back in 2019, I was working with a whole bunch of teens. Would often use the label at risk in various ways. And we were looking for a way to bring more adults into their lives, just to have build multi-generational relationships, and I was trying to figure out a way to do that that would feel very natural and comfortable, and so we launched a Dungeons and Dragons group, and it went really well. And in fact, so well, and I saw those relationships developing. We had age 14 through retired, and just a real nice spread, and everyone was getting along, and we had kids with different kind of neurodivergencies and mental illness and all kinds of stuff like that. But like when you sat down at the table, just none of those things, while you were still you, and you brought to the table who you are, at the same time, just there was this acceptance, like you're welcome here no matter who you are or where you're at, and things like that. And I saw how powerful that was, and a number of things happened in my life that I ended up saying, well, what if I focused on that full time? And really was very intentional about making that happen on a bigger scale. And so then, and about the same time, I was working on what started out as a tiny little project on the side, and ended up consuming my life. And that was Limitless Heroics, to bring disabilities, mental health, and neurodivergence into Dungeons and Dragons. And so that will be published hopefully in about like a week or two. So I'm really excited about that, and we've got a bunch of other projects coming up, but we're focused on bringing helping others to make other lives better through tabletop role-playing games. And as far as affecting my life, besides, I mean, some pretty obvious stuff. Also, I'm like, people would never know this unless they really know me. I'm very much an introvert, and I have a really hard time in social settings, even though I've spent my whole life in very public roles. And what I love about tabletop games is that you can sit down and you have a focus. I'm fine as long as I've got something to talk about. And so the fact that you can sit down and you've got an adventure before you, you've got there's things going on, and even if it's a sandbox game, you've got goals and things like that you're working toward. And so I can have a very social kind of situation that leads to all kinds of other conversations, but that the game provides that means to that helps me with conversations.
That's super important. So that's a really good jumping off point. Tabletop role-playing games, probably even more so than video games, really give us a chance to include everyone, no matter what your experiences are, no matter if you have a disability or if you don't, if you're neurodivergent, if you are not. But what for you guys has been, this is something we kind of touched on in a whole panel yesterday, of course, but I always feel like inclusivity is so intertwined with mental health, and that feeling like you're seen and that you're part of something and that you're represented is such a big deal when it comes to finding yourself and getting to that point in your life where your mental health is in a positive place. But for you guys, is that something you kind of work into things when you are doing things, especially with tabletop RPGs first? We'll get to video games in a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh,
All right.
so
Well, here, this kind of relates to Naomi. The way that I ended up starting working with Naomi was, well, first of all, by being interviewed on my podcast, but then I was looking for someone. I was working on a project that involved abuse and unreported abuse. And I knew that I needed someone to look at this and make sure I was handling it right. And so I asked Naomi to look at it, and we worked together on that, and it turned out really great. I'm super happy with how it turned out, but it would have been terrible without her help. And so so yeah, that was something where we were able to take abuse and I mean, which is like, how do you handle that subject, and all of the trauma and the resulting anxiety and things that people feel connected with that. And so to be able to produce something that had, that was able to cover topics like that and allow people to explore that kind of thing in a setting where they could do it in a safe way, was, I mean, being able to come up with stuff like that is really helpful, I think.
I think so. Naomi?
yeah, just to build off what you were saying, Dale, I think that's the one side of it. The one approach is when you create a story or you construct a game scenario where we're saying, all right, we are specifically going to dig into this subject. And, whether it was that story that I worked on as a sensitivity consultant or some of the other ones I've encountered when I've even played with friends where we've said, these are the themes we're going to explore together. I think that creates a lot of great space for people to dig into something that they may find difficult. I find that when I run TRPGs I've run them with a lot of different groups. I started with folks with vision loss or partial sight. I've run for folks with mental health, and currently, like my most recent collaboration is with Autism Ontario. And when I put together my story, I don't necessarily think I want to add all of these different themes. The biggest thing is around social inclusion. So I want to make sure whatever we're running, people have an opportunity to get to know each other, work together. But I think I try my best to tune into what people are bringing in. So listening to, story elements people want, or just kind of rolling with it. I do a lot of homebrewing. So for folks who don't play TRPGs, that's kind of like modding in video games, where you kind of make up a little bit of your own rules. So I'd like to share a story where I was running for a mental health organization, and they were fighting, the party was fighting an octopus. And one of the characters said, my character is a doctor, and she has anti-anxiety darts that she's going to use to shoot the octopus. Now, there is no such thing, as far as I know, as anti-anxiety darts in Dungeons and Dragons. But having said that, we sat down and we created that item for her character. And I just thought it was such a cool moment of, here is something that people do that they often are stigmatized about, which is taking medication for mental health. And this is a person who's now using this as an empowering tool in the game. So that's kind of, there's that side of it where you're making or setting up a scenario, but then sometimes when you open yourself up to what people are bringing in, just things will happen that you would have never imagined. And it's pretty amazing.
Kind of like an aha moment, right? We hear about that a lot. If you're anybody who works with therapy and things like that, that can be a big deal to see that in action. You guys over at Stack Up, you lean heavily in the mental health side of things. Do you guys use tabletop RPGs as well to help people work through some of their things that they need to work through?
Yes, we do actually. Sorry, did you want to speak, Sean, or go?
Go ahead. I've got an anecdote that'll work for that.
Okay. Sometimes we actually, tabletop is becoming increasingly popular in our community. And it's a lot of people who do it just for the social setting. It's more so for us. It's a lot of, when you get veterans that transition, it's the social awkwardness that they deal with a lot. So being able to just, be themselves online, play a game, and maybe work through their scenarios that way is one way that we utilize it. It also allows them to be themselves a little bit, something you're not really allowed to do a lot of in the military. You do what you're told, you do, etc. So they can kind of, it helps us in a way that they can rediscover their actual personality. When you're in the military, you have a persona that it befits what you're doing. Where this is now, they can finally be themselves, and it kind of helps them transition to it.
Yeah. We, like as Zach said, we've got our game nights. It is growing in popularity, and people are doing that within our Discord suite. So we have that, but again, as a social setting. But I think even to the last question, one of the things that we don't often think about is the effects of community and bringing people together, regardless of backgrounds or where they came from. And so you've got this very welcoming, very safe environment for people to experience perhaps new things. And so when we go and we do these air assaults, which is one of our programs where we take disabled or deserving veterans, and give them a VIP, trip to Comic-Con or PAX West or something like that, and we let them experience that, and because that's something that they may not have been able to obtain, and we give them that safe space and say, no, this is for you too. But when we come back to the Airbnb, I've seen this now 3 or 4 times where my boss, who's a DM, rolls, does a one-shot game or maybe a game that lasts 2 or 3 nights with these veterans, and they've never played before. Maybe they played once 20 years ago, and they get to experience this fun world that is, it's like this, it's part of their experience on the air assault, but it also becomes this neat little journey for them to say, oh, I didn't know that I could do this, or that I had this capability, or I had this capacity, or I could engage with these people across the table that I've never met before and play this cool adventure with a really great DM. My boss is fantastic, and he's very animated and very good storyteller. And so there's just so much of that like I said, I think when you bring it back to the community piece and sitting around a table and having people that are, all the walls are down. Go ahead and if you've never done it before, go ahead and give it a shot. So we do employ it. It happens, and it happens pretty organically, which is pretty fun.
I love that. Before we move on, because I do want to touch on community and community building in a minute. Caleb, this might be something that would be right in your wheelhouse. When it comes to inclusivity, how do you feel that is important in tabletop RPGs as well? What does that mean to you and other people in the community out there?
Yeah, I mean, as we spoke a bit about like the representation piece, and I think it's if you can't be something you can't see, and when we're building these worlds, things that are super controversial shouldn't be like having combat wheelchairs and showing disability in video games, and specifically tabletop games. It's like I talk in my thesis about how like in tabletop worlds we're building worlds within worlds, and we're taking inspiration from our real life. Like there's politics, there are all these elements of games that if you're not including these things or saying they're not allowed, what kind of world are you building? And a lot of the time going through role play in the scenario like Naomi was talking about with building anxiety darts, that's drawing inspiration from the real world and destigmatizing something that is showing that there are different types of people, and like the people who play the games. I'm not saying this super eloquently, but it is so important to like explore what kind of world we can build. Like our real world is not super inclusive, as we all know, for many different types of people. And exploring, well, how could we make it more inclusive? Like that's in itself a lot of time in role playing, like you're building skills that you're not realizing that you're building, but you're also kind of going through like these design exercises of, well, like what is a magic anti-anxiety dart? What is a thing? What is a system that we can create that our friend who needs anxiety darts so that they need them less? So that you know what I mean? Like it's a boundless like brainstorming, role playing, practicing real life skills that you don't realize you're doing. Um, and if you're not including all types of people in that experience, they're missing out.
Honestly, that was well put. You covered so many important things. Like you said, if you can't see something, how can you become that? And I think the same is true for the world we live in. Sometimes we get very bogged down by our own mental health struggles, by the way the world kind of views us or treats us, that we forget that the world can be a good place. And so being able to build that ourselves in a tabletop RPG, just like you said, is such a big thing when it comes to building hope back up, and hope in ourselves and hope in the world and hope that there are good things out there and that they can come to us, that we deserve them. That's such a good point, honestly. The next thing is, well, community building is one thing. You guys really touched on that from our Stack Up group, and that's a big thing for you guys. Your big thing is building that community. I've seen your server. It's amazing the things you're doing. But therapeutically, I've seen some of that as well. I think that's so cool. My question is, which of you have experience actually using tabletops in therapy? And I think this is probably gonna be a Naomi topic for sure. But how do you feel like you can bring that in without making it feel therapeutic, if that makes sense?
I suppose I can get started.
Yeah.
That's a question I ask myself all the time. And I should say I started running or, incorporating tabletop role-playing games into my work as an OT a couple years ago, but I was approached by Level Up Gaming, which is a nonprofit in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I remember when we were running the groups, essentially how it worked, though, to get started is that we have a GM, and then my role as the OT was to play a character and then assist players in any way that, you know, they needed to access the game. And so on that point, I think it's really important because, you know, having a therapist in the space, I think people have a lot of assumptions, or, you know, there's that power difference, or, you know, what, oh, this is therapy, like what am I supposed to be doing? And so playing a character, I think, was helpful for people to understand that, you know, I'm here to support players and whatever goals they have. I'm not here to make it, you know, quote, feel therapeutic in a way that a traditional therapy would look like. We also supported players if they had specific goals that they wanted to achieve. But again, I found over time, we would try to ask people, you know, is there something specific? Like, do you want to meet people? Do you want to practice your social skills? And people didn't really engage with that. And I guess the way I was trained, I thought, oh, I don't know, like, is it real therapy? But as I kept running and helping run games, I realized it's what's happening. You have to know what's happening in the moment at the table, what people are bringing. And it's in those moment interactions that, like, I have so many stories. I don't have time to share all of them, but just moments where people are, you know, having even just I remember from earlier last session at the Autism Ontario, just there was a lot of discussion and debate about how they were going to go forward, and were they going to free the dragon, attack the dragon, was the dragon good, was the dragon bad? And, you know, just noticing that they were so absorbed in the problem that I think they forgot that they were working together and talking it out and figuring things out. I didn't need to necessarily come in and say, look, everyone, we are working on social skills. So I think you kind of let it happen, and then I just try to see myself as nudging it in a positive or constructive direction.
That makes sense. I think that's the same kind of things as Zach was hitting on with kind of sneaking it in there and making it a game. It's not therapy tool. It's not. It's a game, and we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna hang out. And if, you know, some good things happen along the way, then that's fantastic, and you get to be there to kind of guide that. Do you guys have anything else to add on that particular topic?
It's about kind of like the bleed of real life. Like we talk a lot about a bleed and experiencing it. If anyone's familiar with like the literature, so to speak, on tabletop role playing and role playing games. And like oftentimes the call is coming from inside the house kind of thing, like where you're not intentionally bringing these things out, but they will, because parts of yourself will bleed into your character and vice versa. And kind of again, not touching like back to inclusion, when you're given the space to kind of, you don't have to intentionally set out to explore these things, but if you're in a safe that it's space to do so, it's going to come out, so to speak. Like I always think in like my study, my thesis, that we played specifically neurodivergent characters, and a lot of times anxiety being a byproduct of being a neurodivergent person in a world that's built for neurotypical people, that they felt more safe exploring their mental health that results from it. So like I always think back to this time that there was a bartender that was short with one of the characters, and then they felt so bad, and they're like, oh, that was so awkward, like I'm so anxious. And they said typically in real life I would just pretend and like mask that I'm fine, but like their character's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, and they got to play through that anxiety. And then when we talked about it later, you know, it's like I didn't intend to do that, but I felt safe to, and like it made me think maybe I should be more upfront about my mental health anxiety in other spaces. And so like you don't set out to do it, but if the setting and the table is right, it's going to come out.
Absolutely. Building confidence is, I feel like, half the battle sometimes when it comes. I know neurodiversity, that's a really big thing in that community, whereas just getting the confidence to actually be yourself and to try new things and to be more of you, basically. So What other skills have any of you honestly found that are super easy to develop when it comes to tabletop RPGs that people maybe don't even sometimes notice that they're doing it?
Can I throw some out there that has nothing to do with TTRPG, but actually would
That's fine.
probably fit? A lot of people that pick up gaming, video gaming specifically, that throw themselves on Twitch or YouTube and they put some time into that. Um, when I so in like in the army, I was doing counterintelligence and intelligence work, and so I was briefing generals and politicians. That was a thing that I learned how to do, and then through grad school, more public speaking, and then working for the city and city council and public speaking, and being able to do all of that. When I stopped all of that, and I said I just want to be retired for a while, and I started streaming, one of the things that I had set out to do was um, to keep my public speaking skills, to be able to talk to a group of people that can't directly respond, and be able to you know get a fluid thought process out there, get things going. And so I think that that's some of those things that probably passes over to TTRPG too, is as you develop this um, ability to dialogue with yourself, but also people are listening to you, and then you're trying to make sure that that makes sense to them as well, and the way that you're compartmentalizing all of that. I think that those are skills, because you could take that and go somewhere else with that. You could take that ability, that's public speaking, that's communication skills. And so I think that that's something that you can do too, just as much as sitting around a table and thinking through this awesome universe and this awesome adventure that you're going through. Um, streaming or just gaming in general with a group of people can allow the voice to come out, the voice that you may not have known that you had, the one that people will listen to, that people do respond to. And that's also in video games, where you come up with people who are video game Sherpas when they do raids, and people who will shot call for esports and things like that. People then find the leaders, people find the people who have these strong personalities but also have this great game sense, and then you have more communication. So again, I don't want to go too far down, but I think that there's a lot to be said for skills like communication that end up
Mm,
becoming a little bit more honed.
that's a
And
great one. Go
if I
ahead.
could add on to that, so what is the core of TTRPG? Well, that's imagination. What do we use our imagination for? And when you become an adult, your inner child always. I've been joking a lot with people recently about the inner child dies a little when you get excited about certain things, like buying new furniture or things like that. So especially when you're in the military, that gets put in a box. You do what you have to do, and you sometimes come out and you sometimes have fun. But largely, that fun side of you and that imagination is something that people kind of forget to use as adults, and forgets that it's okay. So to be able to bring that out, especially because TTRPG, it's essential. So you bring that out, and suddenly you can have your persona and your character and all that come out, and that's what is that? That is fun, and fun is building positive memories. Well, how do you improve your mental health? By building positive memories and a reflection and moving forward. So it's all kind of tied in together in that regard.
Absolutely. Dale, do you have any thoughts on what kind of skills can be learned through gaming?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a bedrock thing that I think about. Number one, just problem solving. I mean, you in role-playing games, you run into all kinds of problems that are just stuff you'd never expect to run into, and are just completely bizarre things that seem completely unreal. And then when you figure out, number one, just working together, um, just like, how do you work with other people to solve problems? People each have different skills, different personalities, and things like that. You're experiencing that, and you're just building that, which then in turn you can take into real life. And the other thing is a lot of the problems that you run into in a role playing game, while I mean, it may be some fantasy situation with dragons or bugbears or something, but at the same time, those same kinds of uh, there's real world analogs to those problems, and so you go, oh well, this is kind of like when we had this heist, and we or whatever. I mean, hopefully you're not robbing banks in real life, but uh, it's yeah, you those skills. But I think also, um, it's the whole, and we've touched on this a lot, but self-awareness, and recognize who you are, recognizing the skills that you actually have. I know I really struggle. Part of my anxiety is sort of imposter syndrome kind of thing, where I've been told that you're really good at solving problems, but you doubt yourself and you hold back, and then the problem doesn't get solved because you're afraid to to put it out there. And but in a role playing game, there's you can build that confidence to say, hey, what if we try this? And you don't feel the burden of the consequence. Like, if everything goes wrong, well, that just makes for a great story, right? But you learn, oh, I'm pretty good at problem solving. And or whatever it is, I'm good at building up my friends, or whatever. And so you can develop that confidence. Um and also just the awareness of where you're at and who you are. um Boy, if you play the adventures that I write, I'm in one way or another in every one of those, as part of a character. And so I know, for me, just writing them, being able to take those different aspects of who I am, and being able to express them in a character, and something that I may see as a weakness in myself, to be able to put that in a character as a strength, then I can look at that character and say, maybe that's a strength in me too.
That's
So,
such a good point.
yeah.
Getting to step back and sort of see things from a new perspective in a world where everything is fantasy and it feels safe to do that is such a huge thing, because I think we have so much trouble getting that perspective in our everyday lives when we're just surrounded by all the noise and everything that is going on around us. One of the skills that I find like is so important and so tied to mental health and so tied to learning more about yourself, for me, is empathy. So getting to the point where you can have that empathy and recognize things in other people, sort of like you can with your fantasy characters like that, I feel like is just a huge building block when it comes to working on your own mental health and getting better, becoming more you, building confidence, and building all these other skills that we have. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, role play is literally asking ourselves to put our mindset in someone else. Like, obviously it's like an avatar of yourself, but that's the crux of it, is um and I think, to a degree, like, okay, maybe this is just me, but I feel like all games, whether they're role play or not, I can't help but like inject some sort of story or empathy with a character. Like, gaming is asking you to empathize and inject yourself into other worlds.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I
true.
wanted to give on your that point, Caleb, and thinking about what everybody has shared. I wanted to talk about gaming as a whole, like TTRPGs, video games, and just the fact that you're playing somebody else. You're playing a story where you're someone else. And I was thinking about what that looks like in different ways. I feel like even when you're playing a video game and the character, has a name, has their own personality, and has their own story, just by and by nature of every narrative. But I think there's something really special about video games where you're physically directing a character to do something. You get you start appreciating their mindset in a way. Like, I'm thinking a game that I played that was, recently actually had a really profound impact on me was The Last of Us Part 2. I'm not sure if anyone's played it, but you play, and I don't want to give too many spoilers, but you play two protagonists that are against each other. And I think a lot of people felt a lot of feelings because of that, because first you spend half the game in playing one character and who's making decisions that maybe aren't so great all the time, and then you switch and then you see that other perspective. So I think even when you're playing a character that's kind of pre-built, there is that empathy, that understanding that people are not perfect and they make mistakes and they try the best to do the right thing in their circumstance. There's also games where there is no, you kind of just have an avatar and then you can kind of project whatever you want. Like when I play The Long Dark, which is a survival game, I'm making my own story in the game. I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to figure out where things are. And then, of course, like you said, Caleb, with the role-playing games, now you get to be more in control of who you play. And then you can kind of experiment. You can say, I'm a quiet person. I want to play the charismatic bard, or, I don't play a strong barbarian. So all games, I think, all stories help us empathize, but video games have that where it's so visceral, which I think is very powerful.
Yeah, it's
Video
also an
games.
oh, I'm
Go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
It's also an opportunity to recognize. You talk about people that making the choices that they make and things, and I remember when I was working on my theater degree that I had a playwriting professor said, nobody wakes up in the morning saying, I'm going to be a villain today. And just that the whole idea of recognizing when you're writing or playing an adventure, that no matter how terrible that villain is, there's something motivating them, and and getting behind that motivation, and just like how you can actually I've seen this so much more uh, in tabletop games than I used to, back in the 80s. Just this whole idea of what's motivating the monster, what's motivating the villain, whatever, so that you see, oh well, and they're starting to rewrite these creatures and things too, so the goblins aren't all nasty little beasties, and and things like that, and I love that because it adds so much more depth, but it also helps to recognize that everyone's motivated by something, whether it's a wolf that is hungry, or a kobold that's just trying to protect his family. um what's going on there, and then when you start to, and then you can get into all kinds of, are we the bad guys kind of situations, and and things like that, but it can really make for a much more interesting game than just, oh, we're just going to go in there and Ender's Game the whole thing.
So good. Video games do have an interesting perspective on that because sometimes they tell you someone's story and you don't necessarily get the interaction in the same sense that you do when you build your own character. But in seeing that story, just like you guys have said, in seeing that, you get to see a new perspective. You get to put yourself in someone else's shoes just like that. And I feel like that in itself is building a whole set of skills that is just so important for every single day. Do you guys have other favorite games that maybe fits that bill for you? Like what is your go-to to talk about when it comes to that topic?
I don't know if I have a go-to, but there's been a few. I mean, look, I'm a straight white male who engages in all of these different, gaming and video game uh, worlds. And one of the ones that I played, two that I think I can remember, but Horizon Zero Dawn. As you're playing through Horizon Zero Dawn, I am playing a female character. I am not a female, but I'm playing a female character. I'm listening to her dialogue and her um, expressions, her frustrations, her uh, the things that make her upset versus the things that she's committed to do, and the way that she carries those things out. And so I think being able to experience a whole different personality that isn't yours, but you're controlling how that moves forward. You're choosing every other part of how you accomplish the next task, how you do those things, where you go, which wall you climb, which weapons you use. But the dialogue and the way that the story is written is not my story, but I am forced to, in a really interesting sense, live that life a little bit and get a perspective that isn't mine, while internalizing a lot of those things that Aloy is going through. So I thought I had an interesting experience playing Horizon Zero Dawn because of that, because you're playing a female protagonist, because it's something that is um, a little bit different for like, you know, a superhero type of thing. It goes back to the Lara Crofts and the Tomb Raiders, and being able to be in that person and listen to that's the story that plays out and be a part of that. So I don't know. I just think that was a really interesting perspective for me.
No, and I'll build on that, Sean. I've also been kind of gravitating towards story-based games, just for that alternate perspective. I've wanted to hear other people's stories or see things that maybe, you know, challenge my misconceptions or any conceptions I may have, just for personal growth. You know, you see, you know, you kind of get stuck in a rut in that regard. So if you can expand a little bit and play these story-driven games and see things from someone else's eyes, it's a learning experience, and you should always want to learn and grow. So that's kind of where I've been going in that regard with gaming recently. Is I love multiplayer games and the communities that are involved with it, but the story driven games have been giving me that like mental challenge, kind of like reading a difficult book or something, where you're like, okay, now I understand, or maybe this is a new perspective I didn't see before. So I agree entirely.
I resonate with that a lot. A game I always go to, I always bring up Hellblade every single time this topic comes up, because just the way they handled some really heavy topics. I won't really get into it here, but there's some really heavy topics in that game that I think a lot of times are really scary to touch. So to get to see that and see it handled in a way that felt very respectful, but also very relatable even in a fantasy world where the things that are happening around you aren't things that would actually happen to you in real life. Just to see that, just it's so beautiful, and I 1000% cried when I played that game. Does anybody else have a game they would like to share?
Okay, so this
Unconventional.
is. Oh, go ahead.
Unconventional choice, but Stardew Valley. Like, not only is that just like my like, I always joke that it's like my Valium. Like, it just is so calming. Like, it's like the ultimate cozy game. But I get real deep into um you know, it, like I've played so many times, I've explored it, but anytime someone's like, "Do you want to start a farm?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then like I have a farm with my friends where we're gonna be like the beach fisher people. And then we have our like nun commune where we all decided we're gonna be like. There's just so many ways to play that game and like kind of have those fun experiences. But sorry, you're gonna say, Dale.
No, it's fine. I mean, as far as playing, I've only really had time in recent years to play D&D 5e, but I've just a couple of weeks ago, I was I'd had a rough week and I was not in a good place mentally, and I went to mow the lawn and I turned on my podcast feed while I was mowing, and a Call of Cthulhu actual play came up. And I'm listening to this, and I was going, I don't know if I want to be listening to this right now, just the way I'm feeling, but I it's yeah, I'm going to, and by the end, well, it was kind of hard to listen to all of the everything connected, and I mean, Call of Cthulhu has some issues when it comes to handling mental illness too, but um but by the end, I sort of was at the point where I looked at the kind of struggles that I was dealing with at the moment, and I went, okay, but like I don't have a worm burrowing into my brain, so it was like, I think I can handle the stuff that I'm dealing with. It's gonna be okay. I this is it's my problems are not cosmic horror, and it's so all right. You know let's take another crack at the stuff that's going on in my life, and I think I can do it.
That's so great. We have a few more minutes, and one thing I really wanted to kind of get y'all's feedback on is the importance of community in gaming, what gaming can add to community. And then for you guys at Stack Up, with everything you do with your stop program and everything you're trying to do to help people who are in crisis, what are the important things you find in contributing to build that community where people feel safe enough to reach out and to ask for help? And do you feel like gaming helps ease people into that?
Absolutely. You got to build trust and show that you have common ground for anyone to work with you, especially in the mental health aspect of it. Your people are coming to you sometimes in the worst day of their lives, or they're just joining the community because there's like-minded people involved. So the core of that is that building that trust in that community is by finding common interests or even common problems. Believe it or not, we've seen a lot of our community members talking about similar issues they have amongst themselves and not reaching out to my team. And that's a wonderful development to see, is like people are really like, well, I'm having this or that in a blue day, and everyone's like, hey, I deal with that too. And it's an aspect of community building that I didn't expect to see, that I absolutely love, is you see others helping, taking that on their shoulders and saying, hey man, I've been there. And then again, it goes back to that trust element. And then, they start playing games together and they start relaxing and, moving forward.
Yeah, I guess
oh, go ahead.
just to add, at least on the stack up side, for the stop program specifically, Zach's program, if you build it, they will come kind of mentality. You put something in a accessible format like Discord, which is ubiquitous amongst gamers the world over, and that's kind of a some people don't like to call on the, some people don't, they have phone anxiety, they just don't want to talk on the phone. So the 1-800 number, or the the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which saves lives every day, that may not be where I'm most comfortable getting help. I may not want to dial 9 digits and get a person that I don't know, that I don't trust, and have a conversation with. But I'm a gamer, and maybe I grew up playing, MUDs, and maybe I'm used to, MIRC chats, and maybe that's something that I grew through, and now I'm using Discord, and now I have this access to a potentially life-saving crisis intervention, and I can just slide in there and DM somebody, and without having to break down any wall right off the bat, I can at least ask for help that way. And it's somebody that I know is going to be gamer like me, veteran for us, veteran oriented, veteran situated, even though we do help civilians in that program as well. We don't gate suicide prevention in that way. But that's, if you build it, they will come. So in terms of building the community around that, something like that, people will use those resources because they feel comfortable and they feel safe and they feel familiar, as opposed to maybe something that is a little bit too much anxiety for them to get through, and they're already dealing with a lot of anxiety anyway.
So I found just talking about limitless heroics and other work that products that we're creating and things, that just the presence of it is has sparked so many conversations that start talking about it, and people just go, oh well, I'm dealing with this or whatever, and I think people they're reaching out to me and saying, I deal with psychoses, and and I've always been kind of ashamed of that, but now I don't feel so ashamed. And I found that while we don't have the actual physical book yet, that just the conversation about it, and I think once the physical book is there, just being able to put that on your table and saying, these topics are welcome here, that even if you never crack it open, that there's something magical about having, whether it's that or something else. You could have, you could print out the combat wheelchair pamphlet or whatever, and put it down on the table and say, this is okay, you're welcome here. And it just, like, I just see this over and over, the people just sort of relax and go, oh, I can be myself here. I don't have to, I don't have to put up a front or whatever to be accepted here, because this is just part of the community. This is, or having, NPCs that have whatever condition and things like that are, that's handled respectfully and that people can resonate with and things. It just creates this welcoming space. And I'd never imagined that it would have such a powerful impact, but I'm seeing it already, and it's pretty amazing.
That's amazing. Naomi, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, this is an interesting question for me because when it comes to community building, I feel like when I'm an OT, when my OT hat is on, I'm the stepping stone sometimes to other communities. So, although, like I said, I try not to really wave a big, this is therapy flag while we're playing because, everybody is working or bringing whatever they want to the game. At the same time, there's certain, I guess I would even say, go as far to say, as some limitations around community building, which is, on the one hand, it's a good thing that people, when they come, the space is confidential. If they want to share their contact information, that's fine, but they don't have to. And then, once the game is over, I'm no longer there. I'm no longer facilitating the community. So I try to make efforts in those situations to bridge between, coming to a more structured game to, out there in the big wide world of, whatever game that they want to play. So, for example, when I ran a game for Balance for Blind Adults, nonprofit in Toronto, a lot of people who came to my table had never played before, and they were kind of thinking like, oh, I don't know what the deal is with this game. And I feel like going to Discord might have been like a whole new level. So I'm learning a new platform and I'm learning a new game. So, at the end of the day, for those who really loved the game, I said, why don't you go join Knights of the Braille now that you're done with this group? So similarly, like for people who want to keep playing, I always sort of push them into the direction of communities that I think are awesome and inclusive. But, sometimes people appreciate or I guess they benefit from a little bit of guidance along the way. So that's what I try to do in my own role.
Absolutely. Caleb, you got anything to add?
Yeah. So with community building, I think like a lot of mental health distress comes from people being othered and not feeling welcome in whatever environments. And so with inclusivity, it's so important. But with that in mind, like as an inclusive designer, I try to be mindful when we talk about building community and accessible spaces, that accessibility is not like any one thing. It's so different for so many folks. One person with anxiety could have completely different needs, and another person, different blind folks are going to have different access needs and tools that they prefer, like for everyone. And obviously that's a struggle with community building, but I think the unique things about games is and especially like tabletop role-playing games or any like even online games, when you're organizing people around an event, you're practicing those skills to bring it out. That was one of the skills I forgot to mention. We were talking about skill building, but it teaches you like what tools or items that we can do with community building, and like obviously kind of preaching to the choir here, but like I really encourage gamers to like consider what makes their tools accessibility, not just for disabilities, but like who are you welcoming to your table? How are you going to do that? And how do you navigate and continually revisit what you're doing in your gaming spaces?
It's so good. That's all of our time. You guys, absolutely wonderful discussion. Would you guys like to tell everyone where they can find you real quick? We'll start with Caleb.
So I'm Queer Nerd without the vowels, QRNRD. And you can find me anywhere on the internet. You can find queers and nerds.
Awesome. Naomi?
I have a website, which is my name, naomihazlette.com, and I think mostly on Twitter by also my name. So yeah, come and hang out with me at Twitter, or feel free to reach out to me on my website or wherever else you may bump into me on the internet.
Sean?
I am Deity7 on Twitch and Twitter, so DEITY7 on all of those spaces that I occupy.
All right, Zach?
I am Reavantos on both Twitch and Twitter, and if you are someone that's in crisis or someone that needs to talk to someone, feel free to check us out at stackup.org/stop, STOP. Or if you just want to view out what we do at StackUp, just go to stackup.org, and everything is listed there with all of our programs, including our new awesome Phalanx House, which is basically a giant adult tree fort that we bring deserving veterans and active duty over to. to help have fun, relax, and build on that positive mental health.
That's amazing.
Which has a
Dale?
D&D tavern in the backyard, by the way.
That's amazing. Dale?
Yeah, Wyrmworks Dale on Twitter, and the easiest way to find my website, the most easiest way to remember it and spell it, inclusiverpg.com. Will take you to, it'll get you there, and you can find the resources, and if you go to mini.inclusiverpg.com, you can see our next big project of disabled miniatures.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. Next up after our break, we have The Great Brain Robbery featuring Paul Foxcroft. I hope I said that right. So I hope you guys will stick around for that.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.